We will now consider log number 5620 by Mr. Smith. For what purposes, gentlemen from Washington seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk, Mr. Chairman.
Will the clerk please distribute the amendment? Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with. The chair recognizes the ranking member for the purpose of explaining his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment and the next four are all basically the same subject. Are we going to continue our support for Ukraine as they try to defend themselves against the Russian invasion? There are different pieces to each one, but this will be the overall debate of whether or not this committee wants to strongly express our support for Ukraine in this conflict. I feel very strongly that we should and that we need to. The First Amendment here adds $100 million to the USAI account. We have supported it at the level of $300 million before. I think the urgency commands that we step up that commitment. And on this particular amendment, I'll just make two arguments. One is, given the ambivalence that we have seen from the Trump administration since the start, it is undermining support for Ukraine and emboldening Vladimir Putin to think that if he just holds out long enough, we will abandon Ukraine and contribute to the collapse of the 53-nation coalition that has come together to help Ukraine defend itself. I think it's really important for Congress to make it clear that we don't want to see that happen. We don't want to see that support collapse. And understand, I am sympathetic with the Trump administration's desire to end this war and their stated goal to get to peace. But you will not get to peace if Putin sees weakness. If he sees that we're walking away from Ukraine, his actions could not possibly be clearer in the last several months. He increases the attack. He increases all the bombings across Ukraine and presses forward trying to get to his maximalist goals. We need to show that we support Ukraine in order to stop that from happening. So number one is to try to send a message to the Trump administration to keep up the fight. Number two is to send a message to Ukraine and Putin on the same topic. I think those are two solid reasons to increase this. I have a couple of other arguments, but I'll save those for later amendments. I urge adoption of this amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, I recognize Mr. Wilson of South Carolina.
Thank you, Chairman Mike Rogers. I support this amendment. There is strong bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats, for the people of Ukraine. The Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, USAI, allows the United States to support Ukraine's successful fight against war criminal Putin's unprovoked invasion. The Ukrainians are bravely defending their country and devastating Russian military, courageously defending the sovereignty of the people, for the people of Ukraine. The axis of dictators with rule of gun is clear that Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are working together, chanting, "Death to America." As long as the current dictators enslave their countries, national security will be at risk along with world stability. I'm grateful to President Donald Trump for his recent announcement for allowing NATO allies to buy the weapons necessary to send to Ukraine. President Trump continues his willingness to support Ukraine, and we should provide him with all the necessary options. Moscow today mocked and insulted President Trump again by belittling his support of Ukrainian sovereignty, quote, as, quote, theatrical ultimatum, end of quote, by President Trump as war criminal Putin murders civilians in Ukraine and murders dissenting government officials in Russia. We all support ensuring stockpiles are filled to the appropriate levels. This can be achieved as American and allied defense industries are facing the challenge of the axis of evil, as the axis of evil conducts the largest peacetime military buildup in history. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the ranking member for this amendment. I plan on voting for this amendment. A Russian victory will cost us more. We have to realize that. It probably means Moldova will fall if Ukraine doesn't survive this. Maybe Georgia, possibly Azerbaijan. Trump's Petraeus just the other day said Lithuania would likely be next. There'll be challenge in the Baltics. We know from when we're young, if you don't stop a bully, they keep coming at you. And we got to stand up to this guy. And the Ukrainians are doing the fighting, but they need our weapon support to survive. It's in our national security interest that we prevail here. I yield.
Gentleman yields. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Vindman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, it's great to see President Trump finally coming around to understand that what many of us known all along, that Putin is our enemy. The only way this war comes to a halt is pressure on Putin. I'd like to see the president slap the table on this and put pressure on Russia right now, but it looks like we're going to wait another 49 days. It seems to me we're kind of at the leading edge of an irreversible shift towards Ukraine and NATO here, which is the right direction, something we should have been doing all along. The only way to end this war in Ukraine is to put pressure on Putin, and the best way to do that is send Ukraine more weapons as soon as possible. This is a bipartisan issue. Last week, I led 54 colleagues in urging the immediate resumption of munitions shipments to Ukraine. I'm glad to see some of those weapons are finally moving, but 10 Patriot missiles isn't going to get the president the end of the war the Ukrainian people deserve. We need to send massive shipments now and put pressure on Russia instead of Ukraine. We need to keep the pressure on Putin. History tells us he only responds to strength and nothing less. The only way we make progress here and achieve the president's stated objective of peace in Ukraine and Europe is by putting pressure on Putin. This is in our national interest, as Russia has aligned itself with Iran and China, and North Korea for that matter, against freedom-loving countries like our allies and the United States, our own values. Supporting Ukraine is more than a moral imperative, it's a national security necessity. I've been to Ukraine 14 times with the State Department investigating Russian war crimes. I've seen the stakes firsthand. I've seen the destruction rain down on Ukrainian cities and Ukrainian infrastructure. I've been to Bucha, Irpin, Hostomel, all of those names that are burned into our memory as war crime sites. We must continue to support Ukraine until Putin is forced to the negotiating table, and only on terms that respect Ukrainian sovereignty and our own national security objectives. The peace we negotiate must be acceptable to the Ukrainian people. I urge support for this amendment. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Bell.
I had an opportunity to go on my first CODEL to the Middle East and with the ranking member, actually, and the biggest takeaway for me was that stability is hard, but democracy is even harder. And when it takes root, we must do everything we can to support it. If we abandon Ukraine, we embolden every authoritarian watching, from Moscow to Beijing to Tehran. Our adversaries are calculating our resolve. Weakness here invites aggression elsewhere. So this amendment ensures that no bureaucratic or political actors can quietly disrupt our support for our partner fighting for its sovereignty. If aid is delayed or cut, the president must take responsibility and inform top national security officials in writing. But it's important that we send a message that we stand with our fellow democracies. I yield my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm delighted with what appears to be bipartisan support for Ukraine. We've been at this, some of us, throughout the entire Ukraine experience, beginning with Crimea, and even before that, Georgia. And we had an opportunity over those years to understand that Putin is going to continue until there's an unstoppable force, and that is Ukraine. Ukraine has proven that they're going to fight for their future. What they absolutely need is American support. I was just thinking about last summer and the way in which there was a almost an 8-month halt in the munitions that America was sending in the run-up to the summer. And Ukraine was short of munitions, usually like 10 to 1, 155 howitzers. our ranking member is so correct to put forth this issue and to make sure that we're dealing with it here. The details here, 100 million is important, but also the way in which this particular amendment is structured. There may be some that are concerned, well, we're not going to build a frigate. Well, the frigate is in trouble to begin with, but if there's a need for a frigate, there's all the money in the shipbuilding, $29 billion to build ships in the reconciliation, so that could be backfilled. This 100 million is not only necessary, but is a clear commitment that this committee, which I hope would unanimously vote for these amendments that Mr. Smith has put forward, stands firmly with Ukraine. There's a political piece to that, and that is, are we willing to stand with Ukraine? We must. We really don't have a choice for the reasons that the members, Democrat and Republican, have put forward. With that, Mr. Chairman,
Gentleman yields. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Carbajal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We must continue to stand with Ukraine as they fight against Russia. Putin invaded a sovereign nation unprovoked, and if we stand by and let it happen, we are complicit and bowing down to dictators. Weak countries do not fold before dictators. They stand up to them and support for the fight for freedom and democracy. If we allow Putin to succeed now, he will not stop. He has called the collapse of the USSR the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the century. He said this about the same century where we saw 2 world wars. Make no mistake, Putin intends to continue grabbing old pieces of the Soviet Union to put it back together. It will save more lives and cost less money to deal with him now. If he invades the Baltic nations, all of NATO will be involved in a following war. Putin is backed by China, Iran, and North Korea. If that doesn't make clear what side the United States should be on, then we are blind. We must continue providing aid to Ukraine. To delay or stop the full aid we can provide is to side with the dictator. I urge support of this amendment. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Gentleman yields back. Does any other members seek recognition on the ranking member's amendment? If there's no further debate, the question occurs on the amendment offered up by the ranking member. So many as in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and I request a recorded vote. A recorded vote is postponed.